One polar bear liver holds enough vitamin A to kill 52 adults. Not sicken, kill. So why is that only the third best reason nobody farms predators? Because your species made that decision everywhere on Earth in complete isolation without ever once discussing it. Walk through any butcher counter in any country and check what is actually hanging there. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, ducks, rabbits. Every single one of them eats plants, or plants and scraps. Humans have domesticated animals for meat on every inhabited continent over thousands of years in complete isolation from each other, and not one of those cultures built a farm for lions. And where there is no farm, there is often a law. Many religions and cultures explicitly forbid eating meat eaters, written down as scripture centuries apart by people who never met. Where no rule was ever written, disgust handles it instead, which is a strange amount of agreement for something nobody ever announced. So that's the pattern. Here's the first reason, and it is the boring one that explains almost everything. Energy does not survive a step up the food chain. Roughly 10% makes it from one level to the next. The other 90% is burned off as heat and movement and simply being alive, which means every layer you add multiplies the cost of the meal underneath it. Peter, what does that look like on an actual farm?
It looks like feed conversion ratios, and they are brutally clear. A chicken turns roughly 1.5 to 2 kilograms of feed into 1 kilogram of meat. Cattle need something like 4.5 to 7.5. Now imagine a carnivore farm, where the feed is not grain, it is meat, which already cost you a herd. You are not multiplying the number once, Tom. You are multiplying an already multiplied number. Nobody sat down and banned it. It just never made economic sense to anybody, anywhere, ever.
And in the ocean, the same rule gets even more extreme. A tuna sits near the top of its food chain, around the 5th level up. Putting one tuna dinner on a plate takes something on the order of 100 times more primary production than a catfish dinner does. So a predator is not really a meal. A predator is a receipt for every meal it ever ate. That's the surface. Underneath it is something considerably worse, because the food chain is not only concentrating cost on the way up, it is concentrating chemistry. Fat-soluble things do not flush out of a body. They accumulate. Vitamin A is fat-soluble, so it climbs the food chain and settles in the liver of whatever is at the top. And in the Arctic, the thing at the top is a polar bear. The recommended daily allowance of vitamin A for a human is about 0.9 milligrams. You would reach that from roughly 1/10 of a gram of polar bear liver. 1/10 of a gram. Less than a pea. Sarah, what does that much vitamin A actually do to a person?
It is called hypervitaminosis A, and it is genuinely horrible. It starts the way a lot of things start. Splitting headache, vomiting, total exhaustion. Then it gets specific. Your skin begins to peel off in sheets, and not in flakes the way sunburn does. Large sections. People have described losing the skin from their faces. Your liver takes damage, your bones ache, and in a serious dose it kills you. And the cruel part is that nothing about the meat looks or smells wrong. It is not spoiled. It is simply too concentrated for the animal eating it.
So the top of the food chain is not just expensive, it is chemically loaded. And people learned this the hard way. Arctic explorers ate the liver, and so did their sled dogs, and both got sick in the same ugly pattern. The knowledge already existed among Arctic peoples long before any European wrote it in a journal. The rule was known, it just had not been written down in a language that got published. Peter, does that logic stop at vitamin A?
Not remotely. Anything that concentrates rather than clears does the same climb. Mercury and other industrial contaminants pile up in the top predators of the sea, which is the entire reason there is public health advice about how much tuna a person should eat. So the pattern is not some Arctic curiosity. It is a law about what it costs to eat high. Whatever the world puts into the bottom of a food chain, the top of that chain has been quietly collecting for its whole life.
That's the poison, which brings us to the third reason, and it is the one that hunts you back. An animal that eats other animals also inherits their diseases. Every meal a predator eats is a chance to pick up something, and it spends its whole life eating meals like that. So its body becomes an archive. Bears carry trichinella, the parasite behind trichinosis. And undercooked bear meat is a classic way for a human to get it. Toxoplasma completes its reproductive cycle in the cat family and is widespread in meat-eating hosts, which pick it up from the flesh they consume. Foodborne parasites are not a footnote either. They are treated as a major public health category in their own right, tracked and regulated like any other serious hazard in food. And a grazing animal cannot do this to you in the same way. A cow eats grass. Grass is not carrying anything that has already learned how to live inside an animal. Every mouthful a predator takes, on the other hand, is a mouthful of something that was recently alive and recently infected. Sarah, is that where the disgust actually comes from?
Partly, but the timing is the interesting bit. Your disgust does not run a risk assessment. It arrives before you have thought anything. That reflex is doing a job that no individual could do alone, because nobody can taste a parasite or see a vitamin. Cultures that felt disgust at meat-eating animals lost fewer people than cultures that were relaxed about it. So the feeling gets passed down and the reason gets forgotten. You inherited the answer without the working.
So 3 completely independent pressures, cost, poison, and disease, all point the same direction, and that is the part worth slowing down for, because those 3 have nothing to do with each other. Energy loss is physics, vitamin A is chemistry, trichinella is biology. 3 separate fields of science, no shared cause, and every one of them arrives at the same instruction. Do not eat the hunter. When 3 unrelated reasons agree, you do not get a policy. You get a taboo, a rule so over-supported that it survives long after every one of its reasons has been forgotten. Which leaves one thing left to explain, and it is sitting on your sofa. The 2 carnivores we brought closest to us are dogs and cats. Every other animal we pulled into our lives, we pulled in for a product: milk, wool, eggs, muscle, meat. These 2 we took in for company. We had thousands of years and every opportunity to turn them into livestock, and instead they got names and beds and a place nearest the fire. And notice which way the feeling runs. They are the only large meat eaters most people ever live beside, and they are also the 2 animals on Earth we would least consider eating. The cheapest carnivore protein any human has ever had access to is the one we would fight someone over. Affection finished the job that arithmetic started, and it did it so thoroughly that the original reason became unthinkable rather than merely uneconomic. And the exceptions are not exceptions at all. They are the proof. Arctic peoples do hunt and eat seals and polar bears. Of course they do. Where there is no soil, no grain, and no herd, the maths that makes a predator wasteful everywhere else simply stops applying, because there is nothing lower on the chain to eat instead. The energy argument only works if a cheaper option exists. And exactly where the risk goes up, the knowledge gets sharper. In the places where people do eat the top of the food chain, the rules about which organs are safe and which will kill you are held with enormous care and passed on precisely. That is the tell. The rule was never a law of nature. It was always a rule about cost, and when the cost changes, so does the rule. So here is what you are actually doing when a menu offers you lamb instead of leopard, and your whole body agrees without being asked. You are running a calculation nobody taught you. It knows that eating high burns 90% of the world's energy to make one plate. It knows that everything a body cannot excrete is waiting at the top. It knows that a hunter is a warehouse of other animals' parasites. You know none of this. The feeling knows all of it. Disgust is not the opposite of knowledge. Disgust is what knowledge turns into after enough generations stop needing to remember why.